are back and continuing to talk with Della Fetzer, who is founder of Rebel Cultures and has really done a lot of work around discovering how to use different processes to really determine great results. And we've been talking a lot about the work that she's been doing with plants and understanding how we can really create sustainability within growing new plants and impacting so much of our food system and those kinds of things. We're going to talk a little bit more, Della, about how that fits into the leadership you've been giving, not only within your own organization, but even within the community and the agricultural industry as a whole. And I'm curious, what are some of the things that maybe you've learned along the way that have helped you really do that well?
That's a really fun question. So I feel like for me, I'm not necessarily probably the most neurotypical person in every sense of the word. So for me, like buying into this is how people are and this is how to understand people, I feel like I had to take a different approach to that. But I also really care about people a lot. So I've tried to figure out, okay, what's real and what's not real in this sort of leadership advice realm. So I've sort of found myself, at least in the past several years, looking at things in a very like reductionistic way. So, you know, when we talk about like how does a company organize or how are departments organized, I like to zoom out a little bit and say, okay, how do species in nature generally organize themselves, and how do communities in nature that actually have been in existence for much longer than you know, corporate organizations, how do they function?
Right.
Because that might give us some clues about what's actually sustainable and what's not got this sort of undercurrent of like ick to it. Because you know, so much of like leadership and management, it just kind of has this like this ick factor to it, I think. And a lot of it is just based on like what should be happening and how people should have exchanges instead of sort of what people are at their core. So I think it's just zooming out to say, okay, you know, what is the actual goal of all of this? And then what are people actually like? What do people actually need in order to continue existing as people and happy people? And also, what do they need to move toward that goal?
I hear you talking about asking different kinds of questions to arrive at better answers. Would that be a fair way maybe of saying that? Because one of the things that I've often found is that if you ask the wrong question or you know, you get an answer, but it may not be helpful to you. And so starting with what is that goal and what is it we're trying to achieve is a much better question than how do we just get all the parts to work together.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's important to not be, I think we avoid asking a lot of questions because we're afraid of the answers. Do you find that too?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's kind of like, well, this seems like an easy way to get this done, and if I ask too many questions, it may complicate it. So we tend to veer towards what we think we know.
Totally. And I think that we manicure information a lot too. In leadership, I think there's this self-imposed expectation to say things only once you're sure of them, or be really careful about not saying too much. And people and everything, we can only adapt with the information we have.
Yeah.
And we are always hungry for the maximum amount of information. So, if we also don't know what's going to be relevant and what's not going to be relevant. So just like trying to be as open and communicative as possible, without trying to decide what is and isn't important. I feel like is a really easy way to remove that burden of being perfect.
Which none of us is, even though we would like to be. It's interesting because I've heard you talk about being open, and I think one of the ways that I've also heard you maybe refer to that is observing nature and kind of looking at how things are happening around us and how can we learn from that. And I wonder if you could give maybe one illustration or one example that curiosity or that openness that you've used has helped you.
Sure. So think about like a beehive in a tree, right? So let's say that you are responsible for one of the departments in that beehive, and something's going wrong, and you need to make some sort of change. So any change that you make, if it negatively impacts bees, you can expect that things won't go well in the hive. You can just sort of expect that people are going to get, or your bees are going to get sick, or honey production's going to be down, or intruders are going to be able to infiltrate, or anything. And if you, on the same hand, if you do something that would negatively impact the tree, then you can almost guarantee that over time that tree or trees like it are going to not be a willing and accepting host for you. But at the same time, if you were to make a change that would positively impact the bees, then you're going to have a better time. Things are going to go better in the hive, and you're going to have a lot healthier, happier, more productive operations. And then if you do something that positively impacts the tree, your sort of external community, then you're probably going to get additional benefits and more love from that tree, and you're not going to be seen as a parasite. So I mean, it's super simple and it makes perfect sense, and yet we can't seem to look at companies with that same lens. We have all of these layers of people should listen in this way, and they should talk in this way, and they should report this thing in this way. And it's like, well, what are people going to actually do, and how can we work with that in a way that's really going to be positive for everybody?
That's a great illustration. I think it's one of the things that's hard in the busyness of life that we all face, right? Is to sometimes just slow down enough to really think about it in that holistic way, instead of, oh, I just need this one thing to happen, so I'm just going to do whatever the quickest thing is, instead of recognizing that we might be starting about 5 other fires at the same time. And so I love that approach that you have of kind of stepping back, being observant, being open, and understanding that many times, whether it's nature or other people around us, that can really give insights that are helpful to us. We just have to have that openness to accept that. That's great. What is maybe one thing you're excited about that you're you're anticipating, maybe it's on the horizon, or one new thing that you're hoping to accomplish or learn in the upcoming year?
I am really excited to engage with growers across Michigan, both with apple trees and Christmas trees, and in the forestry industry as well, because we're working on a really cool project that's really adjacent and deep into those areas.
Yes.
So I know enough to begin to be helpful, and I can't wait to really connect with these people who have deep knowledge and needs in those industries.
Oh, that's fantastic. It has been such a pleasure to get to know you better and to share your story a bit more. If people are interested in learning more,
Sure.
How could they find out more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we have a website, rebelcultures.com, and we're on LinkedIn, and yeah, we've got some videos up on YouTube.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would love to connect with anyone who has a casual interest or a serious interest in working with us and sort of helping us lead the future of plant production.
That is a great vision to have and purpose. And that's one of the things that we really work with clients on, is just to really understand, to your point, kind of what's the clarity about what you're trying to achieve and that mission that really makes it so impactful. And then how does that begin to drive everything else? And so I just, I've loved hearing that from you and hearing that. So please take this opportunity to go out and learn more about what they're doing at Rebel Culture. And we will look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Leadership Bits and Bytes.